California Governor Gavin Newsom signs a new law banning the use of voter ID in local elections in California. Coming up, we'll tell you whether the law is even constitutional and how we're planning to fight back. I'm Carl DeMaio, chairman of Reform California, and there's no doubt that California has the worst type of election system that you could possibly put into place. In fact, Saddam Hussein is probably rolling over in his grave saying, gee, I didn't need to shoot all my opponents. I could have just adopted California's election system and I'd never have to worry about losing my office. I know, I jest. But look, Californians have very low confidence in the integrity of our elections, according to recent polls. In fact, more than 2/3 of Californians expressed, according to the IGS poll from 2022, concerns about voter fraud in California. And yet we don't have any sort of action by our elected officials. And the media continues to downplay any sort of criticism of the way in which California elections are handled. I'm going to talk about the law that Newsom just signed into effect this week and what we're doing to fight back that bans voter ID. But let me point out to those of you who may not agree that we have a problem, I would like you to go to the website electionintegrityca.com, electionintegrityca.com. And it takes you to a 501c3 nonpartisan nonprofit organization, the Transparency Foundation, that did a deep dive audit of California's 2022 election. And it basically fails California on 9 out of 10 of the election integrity criteria that they apply nationally. Here is the story on that website. If you scroll down to the bottom, audit reveals evidence of voter fraud in California's 2022 election. And this report details with specifics all of the problems with California's voting system. Here's a full view of the cover of the report. Audit reveals evidence of voter fraud in California's 2022 election. And it basically fails California on their 10-point scorecard of criteria for how states should be conducting their elections. It points out low polling numbers for public trust and confidence among California voters in the way in which elections are conducted. I referenced 2/3 of California voters have a concern that voter fraud is a real threat to our democracy. Criteria 2, fail. State does not accurately maintain voter lists. Criteria 3, fail. They don't verify the identity of voters. Specifically, they're not checking the signatures properly on ballots. Fail. Criteria 4. They don't look to confirm the eligibility or the citizenship of people who are registering to vote. Fail. Item 5. Accessibility of voting. They've cut the polling stations on election day, and that raises a concern that California liberal politicians are trying to suppress the turnout of conservative voters who like to vote in person. When you cut the number of polling stations, that creates long lines. When you have long lines, it suppresses the vote for election day voters. And a lot of conservatives still are in the bad habit, of waiting till election day to vote. We believe that you should be voting early. There's a separate video on that on our YouTube channel on why voting early is the best thing for you to be able to ensure the integrity of your ballot and to check to ensure that it was counted and received. Criteria number 6, security of election systems, fail. Though, candidly, most states have problems with the technology protocols to secure access to their systems. There are cybersecurity threats out there, and all states need to do a better job of that. Criteria 7, interference in elections, fail. California politicians manipulate elections by harvesting ballots and funding it using your taxpayer money. They also use taxpayer money to promote political positions. Interference in these elections. Number 8, unbiased and accurate ballot titles, fail. California politicians routinely put deceptive and misleading titles on the ballot. The 10th criteria, post-election auditing, fail. They don't do proper and complete audits to ensure that the process was done properly. Only criteria that they have a passing score on, and I want to give California its credit where it's due, is that you can track and cure your ballot if it's rejected. And in fact, we at Reform California have a website that helps you track whether your ballot was counted by going to trackmyballot.org, trackmyballot.org. Okay, so those are the problems. One of the things that I've proposed is an election integrity initiative, a constitutional state amendment, an amendment to our state constitution to require a few things. And you can find out about my election integrity proposal by going to reformcalifornia.org. That's reformcalifornia.org, and click under Election Integrity Initiative. You can sign up if you agree with me that we need an election integrity initiative. Sign the petition for voter ID. And what do we require? The voter ID initiative that I've authored requires, number one, that you have a voter ID, your driver's license, to vote in person, or the last 4 digits of your driver's license on a verified citizen real ID to cast a paper ballot through the mail. So you have a voter ID requirement. But more importantly, number two, we require that every county update and maintain accurate voter lists. Right now, the lists are not accurate. They're not maintained. They're out of date. People who moved away to other states long ago are still on the voter rolls. And that creates orphan ballots. When you mail out ballots to everyone on an outdated list, it creates what we call orphan ballots to apartment buildings and houses where people no longer are there. So who casts those ballots? Who knows? I mean, you're not supposed to, but when you create orphan ballots, it's just creating more invitation to problems on integrity. So we require an accurate voter list be maintained and audited. Third, we require citizenship reviews before someone is added to the voter rolls. And fourth, we require that the wait times on election day for polling stations be measured and reported publicly, and that any remediation to cut down on wait times be put into effect. This is my election integrity initiative. At the heart of it is a requirement for voter ID. But California politicians don't want voter ID, and that's evidenced by this law that Gavin Newsom signed into effect just this week. Headline: California outlaws local voter ID rules. Now, they passed a state law to basically tell all local cities that they're not allowed to require a driver's license or an ID for voting. Now, these local jurisdictions, specifically Huntington Beach, enacted this requirement for their local elections, just for school board and city council, local. Well, the state said, no, we're not letting you decide how to run your own local elections. We're saying that you're not allowed to have voter ID because it suppresses the vote. That's the claim. Now, you and I both know that voter ID does not suppress the vote. In fact, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that voter ID does not suppress the vote. And so this state law that Newsom just signed into effect, which is part of Newsom and the Democrats' approach to try to stop any voter ID at the local level, where Republicans may have a majority on a local city council, because that's the only shot we have to get politicians to do this, is to go to our local jurisdictions to get voter ID, like they did in Huntington Beach, passing local rules. Well, this state law needs to be challenged in court. Now, on the side of Newsom is the state's argument that the state of California has a right to legislate statewide rules when there's a, quote, statewide concern, an issue of statewide concern, can override local control. The courts have always held that. However, if the concern is illegitimate, voter suppression, and again, the U.S. Supreme Court has already ruled that there is no suppression of votes when you use voter ID. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. They have rejected that argument. As a matter of law, they have rejected that argument in all their cases. If there's no real legitimate concern, then the state can't pass a law to override local control. Now, I would consider it a 50-50 shot in California courts of prevailing. Well, actually, I would say it's more like 1/3, 2/3, because we have some really bad liberal justices that cover for these liberal politicians. So I still think we should challenge in court this statewide law as unconstitutional, and challenge in federal court. However, The only way to really resolve this and to get these other reforms that I'm proposing is to pass my statewide constitutional initiative. And that means we need to collect 1 million signatures and place this on the ballot in the 2026 election. I'm asking you for help. If you really want voter ID, if you want to clean up the voter rolls, if you want to make sure that we have election integrity, go onto the website, reformcalifornia.org, and chip in a contribution. We need to raise about $1 million before we're able to actually do the signature drive to place this on the ballot in the next election. Sign up as a volunteer to collect signatures, because we need to make sure that the costs of qualifying this initiative are as low as possible. Again, go to reformcalifornia.org, and chip in a contribution now and sign up now. Also, since we do have an election in 2024 and we're underway, a lot of important ballot measures on the statewide ballot, 10 of them. And of course, the politicians once again are lying to you with deceptive and false titles. Plus, we found 470 local tax hikes hidden on statewide ballots around the state. That's why Reform California publishes our Reform California Plain English Voter Guide, and it is available to you on that website, reformcalifornia.org. Click under Voter Help, and then select Voter Guides. We have a voter guide for all regions of the state, as well as a statewide guide, reformcalifornia.org. Plus, we make endorsements in all the candidate races from the top of the ticket all the way down to judges and school board races. We only endorse the center-right, reform-minded candidates. So please check out those endorsements and the plain English description on all the ballot measures at reformcalifornia.org. Share the voter guide, use the voter guide, and contribute to the fight. Until next time, Carl DeMaio, Chairman of Reform California. Help us break through the censorship of the liberal media. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and smash that notification button so you can stay up to date on all the developments in California news and politics. Also, please visit the website, reformcalifornia.org, for ongoing news coverage and to join one of our campaigns in the fight to take back our state. If you can, please sign up as a volunteer or chip in a contribution. This episode of Reform California with Carl DeMaio, paid for by Carl DeMaio for State Assembly 2024.